And regionally we have the outer layer, which is the capsule. Just beneath the capsule is the cortex, and just deep to the cortex is the medulla. Capsule, cortex, medulla. Structures in the kidney include the pyramids, renal pyramids. In between the renal pyramids are the renal columns. You can see this blood vessel here, 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 here. These are all renal columns. These are renal pyramids. This little cup here where formed urine drips into from the renal papilla is called a minor calyx, meaning little cup. And then the minor calyces merge to form a larger cup, major calyx. And the major calyces form the renal pelvis. So this pelvis here is the beginning of the ureter, which drains urine into the bladder. And then when you include the pelvis, the renal artery, the renal vein, you have the hilum. This indentation is the hilum. This is the pelvis. Minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis. These are the sinuses in between the calyces. Now this pyramid is represented by this little wedge here, which includes the cortex and the medulla. You can see the interlobar artery, interlobar, you can see the arcuate artery, and you can see the interlobular artery here. Interlobular. Interlobar, arcuate, interlobular. You could also see a cortical nephron, which is shallow, and a deep juxtamedullary nephron. And they have similar parts, except the thin limbs, thin limbs are much longer in the juxtamedullary nephron. You can see the glomerulus, this little vascular tuft. That's what this is, a vascular tuft. It's about 50 capillaries, which increases the surface area for filtration and the recovery of that filtrate in the capsular space. From the glomerulus, filtrate enters into the proximal convoluted tubule, which is attached to Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule, proximal convoluted tubule. Proximal convoluted tubule becomes the descending limb, this hairpin turn called the loop of Henle, the ascending limb, and then the distal convoluted tubule, collecting duct, drains into the papillary duct, and the papillary duct at the renal papilla drains into the minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis. This glomerulus here is supplied by the afferent arteriole, which is larger in diameter than the efferent arteriole. This is where the blood travels in through to form the filtrate. In the afferent arteriole, between the efferent, you have the juxtaglomerular cells, which produce renin and erythropoietin. Filtrate, which exits through the glomerulus at the surface called the visceral layer, enters into the capsular space, which is surrounded by Bowman's capsule, where the inside lining of Bowman's capsule is called the parietal layer. Parietal layer here, visceral layer here. Filtrate is now forced to enter the proximal convoluted tubule, which is the first and only exit from Bowman's capsule. The glomerulus, which is the vascular component, and Bowman's capsule, which is a part of the collecting system, is all called the renal corpuscle. In addition to the proximal convoluted tubule, you could also see the distal convoluted tubule, which rises between the afferent and efferent arteriole, monitors the flow rate through these macula densa cells here, only found in the distal convoluted tubule. This model, which is showing you the glomerulus and the collecting tubules. So just to put this into perspective, this vessel here in red, which is the arcuate artery and the arcuate vein. So here you have the arcuate artery coursing over the top of the pyramid. Here you have the arcuate artery, so this would be the pyramid, and this would be the cortex. So you have your cortical nephron, which is short, and your juxtamedullary nephron, which goes deep into the medulla. So blood enters from the arcuate into the interlobular here, and into the afferent arteriole. That's the larger diameter blood vessel going into Bowman's capsule. Afferent arteriole going into Bowman's capsule. And the filtrate is formed. Blood exits by way of the efferent arteriole, which is smaller in diameter, and gives rise to either the peritubular capillaries, peri meaning around the tubules, these little blood vessels, or you have the efferent arteriole giving rise to the vasa recta. Vasa means vessel, rectus means it's going straight down into the medulla. Peritubular vasa recta. Then on the filtrate side, you have...
Professor, I'm sorry, where's the peritubular again?
These capillaries right here. Peri means around the tubules.
Oh.
Here, all this. Now, connected to Bowman's capsule is the proximal convoluted tubule. Proximal convoluted tubule in orange here. Most of the recovery will take place along the proximal convoluted tubule, and the recovered filtrate goes into the interstitial space and then into the capillary. Fluid travels down, or filtrate, down the collecting tubule into the hairpin turn called the loop of Henle. You have the ascending limb, distal convoluted tubule coming between the afferent and efferent arteriole, and that leads to the collecting duct. Collecting ducts merge to form the papillary duct, and papillary ducts here drain into the minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis. Now, from the kidney, you have formed urine. You can see the pyramids, the renal columns. Urine travels through the minor calyx, major calyx, into the ureter, and travels down into the kidney posteriorly, where it enters into the kidney at these little slit. What do they say?
Kidney.
Bladder. At the uretal openings. These are the uretal openings, these little black slits here. And those uretal openings, in concert with the internal sphincter, forms the trigone. So this is the trigone region, acts as a funnel for urine to exit into the, in this case, prostatic urethra. You can see the rugae inside the bladder, the detrusor muscle. You can see the internal sphincter muscle will be located here. This is a male, this is the prostate gland, and this is the prostatic urethra. Next week, we'll continue with the prostatic urethra, ejaculatory duct, membranous urethra, penile urethra, and the rest of the male reproductive components, as well as the female.